Welcome to The Gap, where it's our mission to bridge the gap between training and on-field performance.
I'm Brett Hart, owner of Hitman Performance.
And I'm Dan Labbadia, the owner of Jacked Javelin.
Hope you guys enjoy the show.
Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have this talk. What you've been doing in the last 2 years with Jacked Javelin has been really impressive. And, for me as a shot put and discus person who also likes the hammer a lot and doesn't avoid the javelin, but is just my weak spot, I'm always depending on my javelin people to kind of just light, light a path for me. Kara Winger has done that over and over and over again for the last many years of the podcast. And to see what you're doing and shining the light on the sport has been really cool. It looks like you're having a blast doing it too, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been really, really fun. I mean, I think that I'm pretty much living my dream at this point. I could say I've always kind of wanted to be in fitness and sports and training my whole life. And javelin's always kind of been that thing that I've fallen back on, going from being cut from the high school baseball team to throwing javelin and then kind of looking at, all right, do I want to go play D2 college football or do I want to go throw Division two? I end up throwing Division two, and then I end up getting out of college and going to be a strength coach somewhere, but then I'm picking up a part-time gig, coaching javelin on the side. And then, sure enough, my javelin content starts blowing up a little bit more than my strength and nutrition stuff. And so here I am at 24 years old, 2 years ago when I started this, and I was like, hey, well, I guess my backup plan is javelin again. And here I am, third time now in my life going all in on it. And so I guess that's just kind of been God's calling on my life at this point in my life. And I'm always going all in on whatever I'm going all in on at that time. And the last 3-4 years, it's been javelin coaching. So I'm really excited to see where things are going. And we're going to get a little bit into it today, talking about how we can try to get javelin in all 50 states across the U.S. at the high school level. So I'm excited to take it to the next level, and hopefully I could be part of that.
Oh my gosh, what you're doing is incredible, and the passion you have for it, I think, shines through in your content. But the laser focus, I think that, talking about, there are a lot of people in our world that are jacks of all trades. And I think what I've seen you do is really kind of hone in on, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it extremely well. And I think that's what's happening. And it's really exciting. I want to go back in time a little bit, Dan. Give us that quick kind of insert map look at zoom in on, you're a high school kid, you're a baseball player. How the hell does javelin, where was that switch and how did that happen?
Yeah, so I was a baseball player and a football player growing up, and I was really, I'm 6'3", 225, and so, football was always kind of like the main thing. It was just like my size and athleticism was always kind of that draw, and I just loved football. Like having the culture and the team and the camaraderie of football was always appealing to me. And baseball was kind of on the back burner for me by the time I got to freshman, sophomore year of high school. So by the time baseball tryouts came around when I was a sophomore, I just wasn't fine-tuned as I was in the past. And some other kids that were all in on baseball were just better than me at that point. So I get cut from the baseball team, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to be a one-sport athlete because it's high school. I'm going to do multiple things. I love training and I love doing sports and competing. So I go out for the track team thinking that I was going to run to be better at football and try to get faster. And one of the senior captains on the track team was like, hey, do you want a varsity letter or not? And I was like, I mean, yeah, that would be cool to get a varsity letter. And he was like, okay, well, you're doing the wrong event. You need to go over there and start throwing. And I was pretty bad at throwing at the beginning, to be honest. It was like definitely a big shift for me. And then I like walked out to my first meet, and I had only been throwing like 70 feet in practice in the jav. And then my first meet as a sophomore, I ended up throwing like 130 or something like that. Just kind of the competition just brought it out of me. And not that 130 is good or anything, but it was enough to get third place in that meet. And then I kind of just worked my way up to about 145 that year and made states, and then ended up being able to throw 169 feet as a senior. And that 51-meter mark was good enough to get me into a Division II school. And so I just kind of ran from it there. And, it was definitely an adjustment learning how to throw and compete in a new sport. But I found the passion for kind of like I was saying in my career, like I felt like the last couple of years of my career, I feel like I was able to really thrive in javelin, maybe because there wasn't as many people doing what I was doing in terms of the social media and the online, and also having some in-person lessons and coaching people in person at a high level. So ever since I was young, I think that you're going to be drawn to what you're good at naturally, and I felt like at that point I was naturally better at javelin than I was at anything else, at least relative to the competition that I was facing.
I want to break down a little bit of that progression, especially because I do think there are going to be some people who have that similar story, especially on the guys' side of I played baseball or I've thrown things my whole life. And what is that translation? You talked about like throwing 70 feet in practice and then, winding up throwing 130 at your first meet. What is the translation from I can throw a baseball, I can throw a football, and the carry over to javelin for people who are, shot put and discus people and don't take javelin under their wing yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. And I just had Mike Stein on my podcast a couple of days ago, and he was talking about how he was able to throw 350 feet with a baseball when he was a freshman in high school. And he was a pitcher, and he started seeing some things on Instagram of pitchers using some turbo jabs to throw. And that's what got him into the sport. And ironically enough, he's from Iowa, which is a state that doesn't have javelin at the high school level. So he goes and buys a javelin off Amazon and gets introduced to javelin and starts competing unattached as a junior in high school in Iowa, competing at these college meets. And, his first season, he threw 59 meters, which is like 195. And so here is this, 5'9" kid from Iowa who, had a cannon of an arm in baseball. And then in his first season, he was able to transfer over into javelin and be really close to that 200-foot mark. And then now, the kid's an 81-meter thrower. And so I've had a very similar experience in my coaching career, being able to see anyone that has a football or baseball background ends up being extremely good at javelin and being able to pick it up a lot faster than kids that come from other sports that aren't throwing related, because they just have that natural overhead motion that everyone grows up with in America. And, we talk about baseball as America's pastime. And then in terms of javelin, we have less than half the states in the United States offer it at the high school level. So, up until this year, Curtis Thompson, just placed third at the World Championships. And so that's a huge breakthrough for us. First time in, since 2007 that we've had someone medal at a major World Championship. And, I look at that and I'm like, all right, we got people like Valerie Allman and Ryan Krauser. And I mean, the whole shot put team and Team USA is just dominant. And, the reason why we haven't had as much success in the JAV is because it's not offered at the high school level. So we're cutting our talent pool in half right off the start. And even going back to when I was in high school 8 years ago, there was only 17, 16 states that had javelin legalized at the high school level. And now we're up to 23 states, which is a good improvement. But going back 20 years ago, it was like 9 or 10 states were legalized. So we're starting to chip away at the process of getting it in more states. And I mean, that's going to increase the talent pool uh,
Exponentially.
already exponentially. Yeah, exactly. And so that's going to be huge is to continue to do that, because it starts with a development at the high school level and then it will work its way up. And obviously, as you have a larger talent pool at the bottom, you're going to have better people at the top. And so, you know, that's the biggest thing that I've seen is athletes that have that really, really good throwing ability in baseball and football are able to transfer to the jab extremely well. That's how I was able to go full time with Jacked Javelin. Is one of the reasons was I actually coached the Division II record holder in the javelin who threw 84 meters last year, Jordan Davis. So he led the USA and is number 6 all time in US history at 84.45. And when he started with me, he played football in college for the first 3 years. So I only trained him for 5 or 6 months out of the year. And I was able to help him get from 63 meters to 74 meters. And then that last year when he quit football and went all in on javelin, we used a bunch of plyo ball throws with the 2 kilogram ball all the way down to like the 400-gram ball, and just using a variety of weights and implements to just continue to work on that throwing power that he already was good at. And then his senior year, we got him up to 84 meters, and he was able to be number 6 all time in U.S. history. And because he had that ability to throw a football and a baseball from the time he was young and be a really, really good athlete playing football, and he was a running back on our college football team, and he just had really, really good athletic ability, and that doubled with his size and strength, and then continuing to hone in on the javelin technique, we were able to get him to a meter away from qualifying for the Olympics last year.
I want to come back to Jordan, but this is eerily similar. My first holy cow javelin acceleration kind of explosion. I'm good friends with Dave Ostrowskis, University of Wisconsin Badgers throws coach. And when he was coaching at Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, he's watching the best player on the women's softball team, Alicia DeShazier, threw somebody out from center field at home plate. One bounced it, just absolutely, crushed this throw. And she was a senior. Dave goes up to her and says, "Are you finished with your degree?" And she wasn't. She had another year of college to finish, and I said, "You've got one more year of college eligibility. Let's throw the javelin." And I think 3 or 4 years later, she's the Pan Am Games champion in the jav. I just don't feel like there's any other throw that once talent is found, you can accelerate someone as fast as say you took Jordan through that acceleration. It's kind of jaw dropping because hammer takes years and years of development. Shot put, the competition isn't going to allow somebody who's just learning how to kind of be competitive with folks who have been doing it for so long. Discus is the same way. And I'm not knocking javelin. I just feel like there's a unique talent necessary. And once that talent can be kind of identified, if you've got someone who can lead them to, down a path, I've seen these massive kind of jumps from knowing very little or being pretty good to being very competitive at the highest levels. What are the attributes? You said Jordan's athleticism, but what are some of the attributes that coaches can start looking for if they're trying to identify javelin throwers?
The biggest thing that I've found is the ability to keep your arm long in the back because, I had Tommy John surgery, and my elbow was definitely something that hindered me from getting up to that elite level in college. I ended up throwing about 60 meters, 60.04. So just really got over that hump with 4 centimeters there. But I had an elbow surgery, and that was kind of what took away from my throw is the fact that when I would hit the block, essentially, I would have no hip shoulder separation. So my hips and my arm would come through at the same time, and my hand and my elbow would be bent at the time of the throw. So then my elbow is taking all of the impact essentially. Then you have someone like Jordan who walks in as a freshman throwing 63 already out of high school. And you just look at how when he hits that position, his hips are forward and his arm is still back all the way. And that is the ability that you want to look for is, all right, when you hit that power position, if the athlete is naturally able to find that whip with having their hips forward and their arm back, then that's where the talent is going to come from in the most part because that final power position is what creates a lot of the juice. And the biggest thing too is when you have a really good layback position and your elbow is not taking all of the force, now your chest is starting to take over the throw and your chest is going to power the movement, which as we know, the pecs are, a very big upper body muscle that helps accelerate that throwing arm forward. And so when you're not relying on those small ligaments like the elbow and that pushy arm action, you're able to rely on those bigger muscles like your chest to take over and give it a boost.
On, we talk about baseballs and softballs. Um, I've also, I know a couple of former volleyball players, especially on the women's side, who become javelin throwers. Is there some logic in that, in that swinging motion, serving volleyball motion, overhead, striking motion that has translation for identity kind of talent identification?
Absolutely. I just actually interviewed on my podcast earlier this week someone that owns a arm swing business, which is basically his whole business model is just teaching people how to hit harder in volleyball. And so he had reached out with questions very exactly similar to you. Just, all right, how are these volleyball people that spike all the time? How does that training translate to javelin? And ironically enough, I have two of my female athletes that I'm working with one on one remotely right now, one from Canada, one from Florida, and they are both throwing, both threw 37 meters as sophomores in high school last year as females, which is about 125. And that's pretty competitive for a female, and they're both volleyball players. And so you definitely see that carryover. And it's just that arm speed, right? You're just naturally growing up with moving your arm fast. And I think that's a different, unique part about the javelin as well, is that it's relatively light compared to the other throwing implements. It's 800 grams, so it's not 16 pounds, right? It's not 2 kilograms or whatever. And so when you have a lighter implement, you're relying a lot on that overhead arm motion, which is very whip-like, and it's you need to keep the arm very relaxed and passive going into the block side, which the block side of the block arm and the block leg will be active when you stop yourself before the throw, but that throwing side needs to be very whip-like and super, super relaxed.
When I look at what Curtis did, my good friend and a guest on your podcast, Kara Winger, 2022 and her kind of remarkable almost final season of javelin throwing. What are they doing so well on the runway in that penultimate step and through that delivery phase that have started separating them in terms of, certainly U.S. javelin throwers?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at both Kara and Curtis, they're definitely both power throwers. But the thing is that they both get through their block extremely well. They don't typically have that perfectly straight, strong block leg that's going to stop them at the throw. They almost use their block leg to accelerate them through the throw. So when you notice when Curtis throws, he hits the block and gets through it very quickly and then almost catches himself with a couple steps after his throw. And Kara does the same thing. She talked about that on my podcast with her of how, she had that ACL surgery and she was never able to hit a straight block leg again, but she used that as liberty to use the block as an acceleration, not a deceleration. And so, you kind of need to know what you're looking for in terms of the throw and how to use your body and your energy effectively in the most linear fashion possible. So that's something that they've done well. And they've just been super, super consistent their entire careers. And so with their ability to use their power and know how to use their blocking style, and obviously they both have very strong arms, but they are super consistent through their 20s and when you're in your 30s for Kara, but Curtis is 29. So when you see somebody that's just consistently at that high level year after year after year, they just built such a good base and foundation in their throws that when they did get to like Curtis being 29 and being able to have his best year ever this year and Kara having her best years, towards the end of her career as well, they just use their experience to their advantage. And that is another good thing for kids that, like Jordan, who went full time with javelin at 23 years old. It's pretty late in life considering, specialization. Like a lot of people that are like, all right, I grew up playing midget football and then, I was a star football player. I went D1 and played football all in 4 years in college and then went to the NFL. It's like they've been playing football since they were a little kid. And these people that are throwing javelin, especially in the US, might be getting into the sport a little bit later. So the ability to stay healthy and refine your technique over a long period of time is going to pay dividends in the long end.
You mentioned earlier there's 23 states, I believe, that have the javelin high school as part of the track and field high school season. Where before we get to the states that need to include or start including and adding the jav, where are the javelin hotbeds? Like, where are the states who have the longest traditions in javelin, and what's that look like?
Yeah, so Pennsylvania has a very strong javelin background. That's the home of Jav Fest, where I take all my athletes there every summer, and it's a great camp and a great meet that they have, great atmosphere. They've been doing it for like 20 years now, 25 years. And so that's definitely a big one is Pennsylvania. And then New England is big too, because like I said, when I was in high school, when I went to New Balance Nationals, it was funny because that's I think the first time I realized that javelin wasn't legal everywhere because I was at nationals and I was like, why is everyone here from New England? I was like, why is that? I was like, everyone here from New England, and then there's like a couple kids from Alabama, and then that was it, or Pennsylvania as well. And it was just like, that's when I realized, like, oh, other states don't have this event offered. And so you see, a good amount of kids come out of New England, and Pennsylvania for sure. And then Curtis Thompson being from New Jersey. So, that tri-state area is pretty good. I mean, New York, we're working on getting it legalized, but we actually have two kids from New York that been doing it unattached or through AAU that are both at the University of Indiana now. So, New York is kind of getting on the map in that sense too, but still working on getting it at the actual high school level there. But yeah, I mean, you see a lot in New England and Pennsylvania for sure. And then, so yeah.
There's been a few states that have added really recently. I think it was maybe 3 years ago. I spoke at the Missouri Track Coaches Clinic, and they had just added javelin. And so we're starting to see a little bit of momentum where there are some states that are adding the javelin. You've started this push, and I love what you're doing. And folks who are not following Dan on Instagram, please go check out Jacked Javelin. But basically, looking for people in states that are interested in trying to push javelin through if it's a state that doesn't have the javelin yet. Where did that kind of passion for you start, and where are you at with trying to connect with people in the states that don't have javelin?
Yeah, so the reason that started was because, like I said, I went all in on Jack Javelin 2 years ago. And I like to say I've been able to accomplish a lot. I've won two D2 national championships. I've coached at the Olympic trials. I had the number one seed last year going into the Olympic trials as a coach at 25 years old. I have the biggest javelin coaching page on Instagram in the United States now at 45,000 followers. My YouTube's growing at 9,000 subscribers. And I have the podcast with my co-host Brett, where we tap into the strength and conditioning side a lot as well. And last year, I came out with my free course, which I added to and finalized this year. I came out with the Jacked Javelin app, which is the first javelin app in history. Um, I've been able to do all those things. Last year or this past summer, we had our first camp. We had 40 people come to the camp, which I would say probably about half of them flew in from either out of the state or out of the country. And then the rest were from New England. So I like to think that I've been doing a really good job of like checking off these little boxes, like having the online training programs, having the free course for everyone, having the social media, having the camps, having the in-person lessons. I got the Jack Javelin business certified as a official USATF club team now going into 2026. So I've really been just pushing the needle forward in my brand a lot the last 2 years. And I came out with the plyo balls this year too. So that was another last piece of the puzzle, just to have another option for people to throw something indoors and support a javelin business. I thought was big because a lot of javelin throwers had always been, going to baseball companies for the plyo balls. And I was like, well, we could support the javelin community too. And so I figured that we would do that as well. And so now I was looking at it like I've accomplished pretty much what I want to accomplish at this point. Obviously, like coaching at the Olympics one day or the World Championships is a big goal for me. But now going forward, I don't have any goals that I think I can accomplish in 2 or 3 months' time. Like the app was like a 4 month process. The plyo balls were like a 3 month process. The free course took me about a year. All the programs that I've written took me 2 years to write them out, revise them, publish them, revise them, kind of dial in the process, film all the videos, do voiceovers for all the videos so that when people are watching the videos, they have my voice instructing them on how to do it. And so doing that for 500 videos, coming out with the free course on the YouTube and all that stuff, like that took time. But at the end of the day, it only took probably 3 to 4 months of hard work for each project that I did. And now I'm like, all right, I'm 26 years old. I need to start thinking bigger. I need to start thinking more long term. And so I kind of made a post about what my long term goals were, and those were to have a facility where javelin throwers can come and train year round, indoors or outdoors. And then my other couple goals were to see a U.S. javelin thrower win the Olympics in my lifetime. The other goal that I had was to go out and, in the off season, the fall and winter, when I'm a little slower, go out and do satellite camps across the country to be able to bring my knowledge to other states where, some of those people from California, Texas, Midwest, whatever, might not be able to come to Connecticut over the summer to visit my camp. I want to go to them. And then the last goal that I had talked about was getting javelin legalized in all 50 states. And so when I said that one, there were some people that commented from Maryland saying, "Oh, I had gone through the process last year, and I did a presentation and it got shut down, and they wanted me to take a look at their presentation to see if there was anything I could do to help them out." And so then I kind of just made a post and was like, "Hey, if there's any other coaches out there in other states that are trying to go through the process of getting javelin legalized, like let me know and I'll see what I could do." And someone else from Delaware reached out saying that they had gone through the process last year. And so I was kind of like, all right, well, why don't I just see if I could make a presentation and kind of go through all the logistics of things and see if maybe I could see if there's other people in any other states that wanted to do this as well. And so I started that initiative of like, just being like, hey, if you're in another state and you want to see javelin in your state, let me know. And then ended up being like over 50 people that reached out from 17 different states that wanted to get on board with helping the movement to go forward. So that was kind of where my heart was at, was just, all right, I've accomplished a decent amount in 2 years, but now it's going to be more long-term goals instead of short-term because I'm in a good spot with what I got, but I want to have more of an impact over the next 50 years.
I have two huge follow-ups. We're going to start with coaching for a minute. One thing that I've said, I don't know how many videos I've created and courses I've built over the years for Throw Big, Throw Far, and now Thrower X. Um, and I don't know how many kids I've coached, thousands of kids. There was a couple year stretch where I was doing close to 2,000, video reviews a year. And one of the things that, someone asks me is like, how did you figure out all the stuff that how do you have so much faith that you know what you're doing? And I'm really honest with it. It's like I went to as many conferences, I've read every single book, I go to a lot of track meets. Kids screw up the throw, it teaches me a new way to figure out how to unlock them not screwing it up. I know you've spent a lot of time going out and seeking out information. Tell folks a little bit about kind of the people that you reached out to as you were kind of gathering the knowledge and that started to infuse kind of how you have approached coaching with Jack Javelin.
Yeah, so I mean, first I want to say that I think that what's really cool about the throws community is how small it is and how niche it is. And so if you start making noise and starting to do big things, you could get connected with people really relatively easily. So a big part of it came from I was being coached by Kevin Foster, who does Javelin Anatomy, when I was coming back from my Tommy John surgery 6 years ago when I was 20 years old. And so that was kind of my only knowledge of or not track and field, but javelin. That was pretty much my only knowledge of like actual javelin technique. And so I had just used his principles the first 3 years that I was coaching Jordan. And when Jordan quit football and was at 74 meters, that's when my Instagram started to pick up some traction. And I was about 7,000 followers at that point. And I had been posting some things, and maybe some people weren't necessarily agreeing with them and kind of messaging me and saying, hey, you might want to rethink how you're wording this or doing so on and so forth. and just kind of expressing the concern that I was posting, but I was young and naive and didn't really know what I was talking about. And I kind of took that upon myself to be like, all right, well, do you have any opportunities for me to come out and work with you and see what I could learn? Because I wasn't trying to be one of those people that just tried to know it all. I wanted to learn. And so that season when I was 24, it was 2023. I was like, all right, well, let me see how many trips I could do to go gain new perspective on some things. And so I flew out to Florida to go see Kevin Foster again with his athlete Mike Stein, and that was a good tune up for me because I hadn't been coached by Kevin in about 4 or 5 years at that point. So he had refined his process and learned some new things that he taught me that was really helpful because me being coached by him for 2 years and then kind of just regurgitating that information to my athletes, like that was good as a start. But when he was still learning at that time, when he was coaching me, there's obviously more that he had to teach me. And while I was in Florida, I made the initiative to go see Tom Petronoff, who has the Turbo Jav business and coaches Donovan Banks. And so I went out and trained with them for a day, and I was able to get his style on things, which was definitely unique. And he is very, teaches the throw very linear and just a little bit different than a lot of other people. And so getting his expertise on it with, all that he's done was really cool because obviously he was a former world record holder with the old school javelin through 99 meters. And then he actually came from a baseball background as well. So he has a lot of knowledge to give in that area. And then the other one was the USA Javelin Project and going out to the LSU camp that February in 2024. And so that was big because I was able to meet Tom Putskis, Raymond Hecht. They both competed against Jan Zelezny in the Olympics, and they do things a little bit differently as well. And Sean Fury was there, who was at the Olympics twice through 83 meters, and then that led to me being invited to go coach at JavFest that year in Pennsylvania that following summer. And so that was definitely big in my development because I needed to get outside of my box that I knew and be like, all right, there's more information out there. And so through learning from all these different Olympians that off season, I was able to kind of pick and choose what I thought made sense for me and my model. And I essentially took bits and pieces from literally everybody that I visited that off season and was able to implement them into my own system. And that was a huge part of my development because a lot of what Kevin Foster from Javelin Anatomy was teaching me started clicking when I was starting to learn stuff from Petronoff. And then the stuff that I learned from Petronoff was starting to click when I learned stuff from Putskis. And so a lot of times you kind of need to hear things a little differently in order to truly digest them and truly comprehend what you're trying to accomplish in the throw. I think the biggest takeaway for me was like the purpose of the left arm was because I always kind of learned it as an active left arm, and I was always ripping my left arm down. And I learned, that left arm is active, but it's supposed to stay long out in front of you because your right shoulder or your throwing shoulder will follow the block shoulder. So if you're ripping that left shoulder down, then your right shoulder is going to sweep through, and you'll a lot of times start to pull your throwing arm in, which is a very common problem that I had in the past anyway. So then when I learned how to, keep the arm long and active, and you essentially roll the left arm down or roll the block arm down, your throwing arm will simultaneously roll up because it's going to mirror that opposite motion. So if the block arm rips down and active, then the throwing arm will pull in prematurely. But then if the block arm stays long and rolls down, then the throwing arm is going to stay long and roll up. And so that was huge for me because that whole concept of active versus passive or action versus reaction clicked in that moment. And that's something that I don't really know if I would have gotten that if I didn't go out to visit all those people. And like I said, it wasn't just one person that taught it to me. It was one person taught me the idea of action versus reaction, then the other one taught me the idea of staying long, and then the other one taught me the idea of staying long and active and passive. And then that's when it all kind of came together and clicked.
I love the idea of pulling these different kind of pieces of information. You said it best when, you know, needing to hear something slightly differently from a different perspective, even though you're maybe talking about the same idea, and you start infusing it with the things that you already know, or gives you a new idea, combination of ideas. Were there things that you brought then back to Jordan's training as he was making those, you know, giant leaps from mid 70s to mid 80s?
Yeah, definitely a big one was the idea of the back hip. So essentially when you hit the penultimate, you're throwing or your block side. So sorry, when you hit the penultimate, your block leg pulls the penultimate leg down, and then you sweep through with the back foot. So Jordan a lot of times would almost fully rotate his hips into the block. So then by the time the block hit, there was no rotation left because he was rotating fully in the air. So a big thing that I learned that I taught him was you want to almost land with your back hip rotated at about 85 degrees and then that or 85% of the way forward. And then the last 15% of the hip rotation will happen after the block. So that's how you're kind of getting that last rotation into the block. So you're still using that idea of, okay, I'm staying closed off during the crossovers and I'm opening up into the throw, but you're using the ground force contact to still rotate into the block and get that rotational aspect into the throw while you're still trying to simultaneously get your energy linear. So that was a big thing for him because um, I was always kind of like, all right, you hit the penultimate and you're going to open up into the throw, but it's almost like, yeah, you will open up because you have to, right? You can't land completely closed off, but you need to do it in the right timing and have the right amount of hip rotation before the throw and a right amount of hip rotation after the block.
Love it. Let's go back to the 50 states project. Um, I'm going to give you some for instances. Give me your best Jack Javelin response to kind of quell my nervousness. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm a shot put and discus coach in state X that does not offer the javelin currently. I coach in Wisconsin. We do not offer the javelin. We brought this up at our caucus, our coaches caucus last year at our state level, and the overriding thing that I heard was, I sometimes don't have time to coach two events. How could I possibly add a third? So that's a real fear, I think, for some of the throws coaches in states that have not adopted the JAV. What do you say to those coaches that might support their belief that they could add this, they could do it?
Autonomy. I think you need to teach your athletes to be autonomous. And I think the reality is that even in the states where the javelin is in high school events, a lot of those javelin throwers aren't getting a lot of coaching at their high school level anyway. And so that might not be the answer that you want to hear or that other people want to hear. But at the end of the day, you got to give your athletes, you teach them the basics, you teach them the proper safety precautions. And I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing is how many times have I heard, the javelin coach at my school is no help or the coach at my school doesn't assist in the javelin. They don't know the event. And then that's where people like me come into play of having the resources and being able to help these kids online or in a private way. And you know, I just think that it's very valuable for kids to learn how to be autonomous as well because even in college sector, you're not getting a lot of javelin coaches as well. Like sometimes the javelin throwers are thrown in with other events and they kind of just have to figure it out. And it's one of those things where it's not something to be scared of, but you just have to look at it like the kids that are gonna take it serious and do really, really well are gonna be the ones that are going to take the initiative to learn on their own. And like I did, I was at a school and I was kind of all right. I was lifting with the shot putters, and then I was sprinting with the sprinters, and then I was doing my plyometrics with the jumpers. And when I would throw javelin, I was completely on my own. So that's why I hired Kevin from Javelin Anatomy because I really wanted to be the best. And then I was able to use that knowledge and now give back to the next generation. So that's the biggest thing is you got to have trust in your athletes that if they're going to be good at javelin and they're going to like it, they're going to find a way to get better. And take some stress off the coaches and know that you don't have to try to be Superman. You don't have to try to do it all. There's plenty of resources and opportunity out there for kids that are into the sport to get better. And that's a big part of why I wanted to put out my free course as well, is like I can't help everybody. I obviously like I would be capped at, say 40 clients or whatever, right? If you look at a 40-hour work week. And so at that point, it's like, all right, well, if I can't take you and work with you, whether it's remote or in person, at least I have my free course that you can use to help yourself and guide you along the way. And so now I think that that's been a big part of the Project Javelin, we want to call it Javelin launch, as I've been saying. And that's been a big part of it is like I'm trying to solve all the problems before we get to the problems, right? So the education, the resources, I believe that they are solved because there's way more out there now compared to 10 years ago. And it's definitely possible to get the job done if the kids are willing to make the investment themselves. And so for those coaches that are nervous about adding another event, just know you have to have a very base level of knowledge and just trust your athletes. And if you're worried about safety, then you say, hey, we're only having 5 javelin throwers or less, right? It's like you obviously maybe you don't want to have 30 kids trying to throw the javelin. It might be, you might not have enough javelins at the beginning, right? If you're still trying to get your inventory up as a school system implementing it for the first time. So you put a cap on how many kids can do it in a given practice, and the ones that are really good are going to stand out anyway, and the ones that are going to take it serious are going to find a way to get better. And then there's people like Jordan who threw 63 meters in high school that didn't have any help anyway. And so you have to have that level of trust and autonomy with your athletes to get the job done. I mean, I'm sure there's hundreds of examples of kids that didn't have the quote unquote proper help in their event and still had success just because they were given the opportunity and they had a natural talent and passion to get better.
I think the opportunity is key, right? If I'm a javelin thrower, I've Kara and I have talked about this about speed on the runway. They're probably doing something on the track one day of the week. They're in the weight room. They're doing plyos. They're doing other things. How many days a week do they need to be throwing the javelin, especially if there's a meet, say there's a meet every Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point that you also, the coach can take some stress off in that manner as well and realize that due to the high volume of elbow and shoulder injuries that could happen from overuse of overthrowing the javelin, especially when kids are brand new to it, they really should only be throwing the javelin twice a week. And so, if they're having a meet on Saturday and then, you figure they have like one tune-up practice and then one maybe harder throwing session, and that's about it. And that could be 45 minutes to an hour. It doesn't have to be anything strenuous or too extensive. And then the rest of the time they could be doing approach work, they could be doing shot put, other events, and they could be doing ball throws with a baseball or the plyo balls or whatever. And I think that that's a good point to look at it as well too, is that if a coach is worried about that, then don't worry about it because it's not going to be a 5 or 6 day a week thing where you're going to have to spend 2 hours coaching the jav. It's like you were talking about earlier too. There's a lot of transfer over from those other sports. So if kids have a good overhead throwing background, they pretty much, they got to go out and fine tune their technique, learn how to throw through the point, get it to stick in the ground, um, and that's pretty much the basics of it. They don't have to go too crazy at those team practices.
I think one of the things that I felt very comfortable as I was trying to promote this idea in Wisconsin last year, and there were some other coaches who were definitely interested in it, but I think there were far more coaches who were just didn't have enough knowledge to really even form an opinion. And then there's some people just terrified of it. I think the idea of any coach who's had success coaching can figure out how to coach just about anything. So I think there's enough knowledge out there. We'll talk about the knowledge that you can share with those coaches in a minute. But I think there's enough knowledge out there that you can give your kids the opportunity, which is key, give them enough knowledge so that they can go and start experimenting. And I think the other thing is not expecting that you're going to be as good at coaching the shot put or the disc or the javelin as you are at coaching the shot put and discus, if that's what your experience level is at. I also think that with new states that might be adding this, almost all the kids that are going to be competing in it are going to be new. There's going to be some outliers because of just physical attributes, but I think coaches can grow with the event because they're new to it with the kids that are brand new to it as well, and that they're not going to get blown out of the water by, oh my gosh, school X has that tradition where they are always good and I'm not going to be any good at it. School X probably has just as limited amount of knowledge about the javelin as any other school. It might be a great opportunity for maybe a school that hasn't had that tradition to maybe invest in something that they could build a tradition in.
Absolutely. And you see that like you were talking about, it's a pretty low barrier to entry if everyone's just starting off with it. And you look at how many times people have had the opportunity and ran with it, and then they're able to really just have a lot of success. And like you were saying, like I'm a living, breathing testimony of that, of how in the last 2 years, I've expanded my knowledge tenfold in the sport. And so if I could do it, anyone could do it. And obviously, I'm doing this full time, so this is all I do every day. It doesn't have to be to that extent, but if you put, if you have no knowledge and then you put 10 hours into learning the javelin, you now know 10 hours more than you did before. And so now your knowledge of the sport goes up exponentially, just going from nothing to something. And so it's really just one of those things too, where even like, if you look at us, right? Like, did you know how to do a podcast until you started doing a podcast?
Well played, yes.
You know
No,
what
I
I
did
mean?
not. 9 years, 10 years
Yeah.
ago, I didn't know what a podcast was.
Yeah, and so that's exactly I'm in the same boat. It's like I started my podcast 2 years ago. I didn't know what I was doing, and now we're 110 episodes in, and things are rolling. It's like I'm a coach. I'm not a podcaster, and I'm not a producer, but I do it. I figured it out because it's something that I wanted to do, and you learn as you go. And it's like I like to think, now if you watch our YouTube video, it's like we got three camera angles, we got the microphones and all that stuff, and we're recording on I don't even know what it's called, the sound box. Like it's just all this different stuff that I had no idea about 2 years ago, and I just did it because I threw myself out in the deep end and figured it out slowly but surely. I could say the same thing for working with the team of software developers to build my app out. I could say the same thing about learning how to edit my YouTube videos. The list goes on and on and on. That I started this 2 years ago, and you see where I'm at now just because I put the time in to get better at it a little by little. So if a shot put and discus coach has no knowledge about something, then yeah, I mean, in 5 years, you'll be a lot better at it than you are right now.
Let's go rapid fire on some questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. I'm a high school coach in a state. I'm looking for help from Dan to get javelin to my state. How do I get a hold of you?
You can DM me on Instagram or email me at info@jackjavelin.com.
Jack Javelin and Dan Labbadia have a free course on the javelin. How do I get the free course?
You could download my app on the Google Play Store or on the App Store, and it's right inside the app at the bottom tab. Or you could go to my website and download each PDF individually, and it's all free.
I'm nervous. I don't have a javelin runway on my track. Where do you throw the javelin if you don't have a javelin runway on the track?
You can throw it in any open grass field, probably should be at least 200 feet, 250 feet. And if you don't have grass, you could do turf as well. So you get the rubber tip javelin. You could throw off the high jump area onto the infield.
Where do I get rubber tip jabs?
You could get them at throwerx.com or at fourthrows.com.
I love that. Shameless plug. Hey, plyo balls for javelin throwers. Where can I get those?
You could get those at shop.jackjavelin.com or thrower
Fantastic.
and thrower X, right? You guys
Yeah,
have them too?
we do have those balls as well.
No, let's
Um,
go.
Anything else that we missed today for especially for coaches who we've got their ear, they're interested, and they want to dive into this javelin world and see if they can add it to either their coaching repertoire, even if it's not going to get adopted by their state, like a guy like me who has a club and I just want to promote the throws. I want to be able to teach kids the javelin so that maybe they have an opportunity in college to get some coaching there.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the state level and the high school level, the biggest thing is we just got to keep chipping away at it. Like I said, 20 years ago, we had 9 states that had it. Now we're up to 23. So this process has already begun where more states are becoming open to adopting it. And the rubber tip javelin is, I think, a great way to introduce that into the states as well, because, when people are voting on it, it seems like a safer option. And I would say that, the other thing is to just have javelins to be able to give your athletes, like if you're a coach at a throws club, you want to make sure that you have javelins so that you can just have the kids go out and start learning the technique. And like we talked about, if you have an outlier and then they're really into it, and that's when you can start investing some more time and energy into them. And even if it's not your specialty as a coach, but yeah, I would say that's the best way to begin is to understand if you're trying to get it legalized in your state, it takes someone speaking up and bringing a presentation forefront and having them vote on it and going into that presentation. And that's a big thing that I've done is, I have a presentation now in the rough draft form that has about 20 slides on it where I'm trying to essentially solve every problem and every question before it gets brought up in that meeting and in that presentation. So, for example, my rough draft presentation will then be dispersed to Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Texas, California, and the team captain and the team that I've assigned in that state will then revise it with language specific to their state that they need to get it legalized in that state and to be able to present it and bring it to the forefront. And I think the biggest thing is just if you're passionate about helping me out with this process, you have to understand too that, say this year we have 10 presentations given across the US, we might get it legalized in 3 states maybe if we're lucky. And then the next year we got to take those 7 states that didn't get passed and we got to present it again and we'll add 3 more states to the list and just keep chipping away at it slowly but surely. But my biggest thing was trying to inspire people to go out and do it and help in any way I can so that we could expedite the process and try to get the ball rolling on it faster than it already is.
Dan, congratulations on all the success you've had already. I'm really impressed with your passion for this, and I hope that people catch on to this. It's contagious, so I hope they catch whatever you got. It's good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm looking forward to having my first group call with all the 50 contacts that I have now because, that's the biggest thing is that I'm essentially the overseer of this project and the inspiration and trying to be the administrator to put together all the logistics that they need to get it successfully implemented into their state.
How soon is that going to happen, Dan?
The presentations or
Yeah.
the Zoom. Um,
This initial kind of Zoom talk.
Oh, so I'm doing the Zoom talk on Tuesday. I have next Tuesday. I have a meeting with Liam Christensen on Saturday, which he's the one that got it implemented into South Carolina 4 years ago. So he's familiar with the process, and now I'm essentially just trying to pick his brain on how to do it on a larger scale. And so yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we'll get 5 to 10 states to present it to a board of athletic directors this year. The biggest thing for me is experience. Like I was saying earlier, it's like I've never done this before, so people got to bear with me as I kind of work through the kinks. But if I could even help get it legalized in one state and we fail in 9 other states this year, then I have the context to understand, okay, what went wrong in those 9 states? What do we have to do differently next year? What went right in that one state that got it approved? And just keep expanding on that process year after year. And that's just how the process is going to get refined because if I keep doing this year after year and keep bringing it to the forefront, eventually I like to think I would be pretty good at it and continue to be a better facilitator of a project of this scale.
The dream is to see a U.S. javelin champion, men's or women, before in your lifetime, he said, and
Yeah.
I think you're on your way. I'm a big believer in the top of the pyramid. The tip of the pyramid can only be as high as the base is wide, and so you're building the base, and I think people are going to jump on board, and we're going to see this thing happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to happen. Let's do it.
All right, Dan, go check Dan out on Jack Javelin. Dan, thanks so much for your time today.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me on.
An absolute pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in.
And if you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and review and share the show, because the only way that this show grows is if you like it, share it, and tell your friends and family about it.
New episode every Monday.